Welcome, listener, in the shadows. We bring stories into the light. Join me as we explore the encounters no one speaks of and the things that watch from the dark. If you're still here after all that, you already know the kind of stories we tell. The kind that crawl under your skin, that echo in the quiet when the episode ends. If you want to carry a piece of that darkness with you, wear what haunts you. Our exclusive line of merch is made for listeners who feel more at home in the uncanny, the unspoken, the things that don't make sense in the daylight. Shirts, hoodies, and other gear, designed with that same atmosphere of dread, mystery, and whispered wrongness. Candles support the channel, feed the stories. You can grab yours at https://theshadows printify me, and as always, don't look behind you. Shaped like us, the Arizona Fire Doppelgangers, Chapter 1. The Ridge Ignites. The first thing Sam Garrison noticed wasn't the heat, not the smoke, it was the silencing. Wildfires didn't start like a roar, they whispered. The first hissing came from the manzanita bushes along the ridge, the dry resin snapping, popping like brittle bones. Birds scattered with sharp cries, and even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Sam had been a hotshot for 15 years. He knew every warning sign. The way the smoke curls against the sun, the way the ground smells after weeks without rain, the subtle vibration in the ridge that told him the fire was moving faster than the eye could follow. But today, something about it was wrong. The fire had merged 2 lightning strikes from 2 days ago into a single, sprawling beast, licking at the eastern slopes of the range. Sam's crew, 12 strong, had been digging fire breaks since dawn, axes and shovels in rhythm, boots sinking into the scorched earth. Then came the first figure. It appeared just above the ridge, barely visible through the thickening smoke. A human shape, tall and naked, skin pale against the muted orange of the blaze. At first, Sam thought it was one of the other crews, maybe a firefighter who had lost his helmet, his Nomex torn in the heat. But something about the way it moved was wrong. It walked straight, shoulders swinging in a loose rhythm, feet never faltering over rocks or charred stumps. And it looked like him. Not vaguely, every detail of the figure resembled Sam. His squared jaw, short-cropped hairline, the scar from a chainsaw kickback years ago. And it was walking directly toward him, completely oblivious to the heat or smoke. Sam blinked, rubbed his eyes. Heat shimmer, fatigue, a trick of the smoke. But then he saw a second figure. Carla from his crew, or at least something shaped like her, moving in perfect imitation of her gait, her head tilting at the same subtle angle she always favored. The wind shifted, carrying a smell like burned sage mixed with scorched earth. A sweetness threaded through the smoke, faint, mineral, impossible. Sam swallowed hard, feeling the familiar prickling at the back of his neck. The fire wasn't the only thing out here, and it wasn't going to wait. Chapter 2. Faces in the smoke. By midday, the fire had grown into a rolling wall of flame that swallowed the eastern ridge in orange heat. Sam's crew pressed on, shovels biting into the scorched soil, boots crunching over blackened pine needles. But the smoke was thick now, heavy, grey, and alive. It moved like a tide, curling over stumps and rocks, snaking into the trenches they had dug, and through it figures appeared. At first, Sam thought it was his imagination. The human eye craves recognition, and in the flickering haze of wildfire, even twisted branches could resemble a familiar shape. But the shapes didn't disappear when he blinked. They moved with intention. One by one, crew members started pointing, their shouts barely audible over the hissing fire. "Did you see that?" Carla's voice trembled as she scanned the smoke. I don't know. Maybe just a reflection," Sam said, but he didn't take his eyes off the ridge. Another figure emerged, tall, lanky, walking barefoot across charred soil. Its face mirrored Miguel's exactly. The same stubble, the same wide nose, the same black helmet smudge he always had on his forehead. Only it didn't stumble on the uneven terrain. It glided. The crew froze, their hands tightening around axes. Even in a wildfire, training couldn't erase the feeling of wrongness creeping up their spines. "It's like it knows us," whispered Carla, gripping Sam's arm. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the shape advancing steadily toward them. Sam's pulse hammered. He squinted against the smoke, trying to focus. The figure raised its hand, not in greeting, but in a perfect mirror of Miguel's habitual wave. His mind screamed that this was impossible. Miguel wasn't waving from above the ridge. Miguel was digging a firebreak 50 yards behind him. Then another appeared, walking down a shallow gully toward the line of crew members. Sam's stomach churned. Its face was his own, pale and unblinking, eyes locked forward. He took a cautious step back. The air thickened, carrying that impossible scent again, a mineral sweetness, burning sage, something wet, almost like sweat on stone. Every inhalation made Sam's lungs ache, made his skin crawl. The figures moved in unison, slow, deliberate, always watching, always learning. Even as the fire licked higher, even as the heat pressed down like a living thing, they didn't flinch. They didn't blink. "Everyone stay calm," Sam barked, forcing his voice over the roar of the fire. "Stick to the line, don't engage." But no one moved. Eyes flicked from figure to figure, scanning the smoke for the next imitation, the next perfect copy. Every heartbeat brought another glimpse of themselves, mirrored and wrong in the haze. It wasn't just hallucination, it was a warning. The land remembered them, remembered every face, every scar, every fleeting expression, and it was shaping them into something else, something that walked, and it was learning fast. Chapter 3. Crossing the line. By late afternoon, the ridge had become a chaotic labyrinth of smoke, fire, and shadow. Sam's crew moved cautiously, axes in hand, ears straining for the hiss and crackle of flame and the subtle sounds of imitation. The figures were everywhere now, glimpsed at the edges of vision, rising from gullies, sometimes following at a distance, always mimicking. Each time someone turned to confront one, it vanished into the haze, only to appear somewhere else, perfectly imitating the person who saw it. Miguel stopped abruptly, pointing at a hollow near a fallen oak. "Sam, look!" Through the smoke, Sam saw it, his own form, perfectly mirrored, crouched where he had been only minutes before, hands gripping an invisible Pulaski. His shadowed eyes locked with Sam's. Sam's throat went dry. "Everyone, stay calm. Do not approach it." But Carla's curiosity overcame her fear. She stepped forward and the figure rose, rising unnaturally, straightening like a marionette. Its shoulders mirrored hers, its movements her every habit, her every tick. She froze. Its lips curled into the same faint smirk she had when joking with the crew. It's me," she whispered. The replica's hands reached out. Sam grabbed her arm, yanking her backward. The thing didn't stop. It glided over the blackened ground, stepping around smoldering stumps, never stumbling, never blinking. The fire was closing in. Heat pressed against their backs, smoke clawed at their lungs, and the ridge trembled as the blaze leapt across fallen trees. Sam swung his axe at the nearest figure, but his swing passed through air. The thing wasn't solid, at least not like a person. Yet the moment he swung, it tilted its head, almost inquisitive, matching his movement perfectly. "They're learning," Sam muttered, voice raw. "They're watching. Every motion, every reaction. The more we move, the more they copy." Miguel coughed violently, covering his mouth. From the corner of his eye, he saw his own reflection in the smoke, the way it hunched, the way it held its axe. Every micro-expression, every twitch was perfectly mirrored. Sam realized something terrifying. These weren't just imitations. They were studying them, understanding them. The fire had drawn something ancient out of the mountain, something that remembered the faces of those who walked across this land, who had survived its burnings. And now it wanted them. From the smoke above the ridge, a chorus of footsteps rose, echoing their own. The sound wasn't just behind them or ahead, it was everywhere, pressing in, mimicking their rhythm, their stride, their heartbeat. Sam barked orders, but the sound of his own voice, twisted and returned from the smoke, made the crew flinch. "We have to move," he shouted, realizing that the only way to survive might be to run straight into the unknown caves the fire had exposed, the very place these things had come from. Even as the ridge trembled under the fire's advance, the figures pressed closer, following, learning, unblinking and patient. The first real confrontation had begun. Chapter 4. The caves awake, smoke hung thick like a curtain across the ridge, stinging eyes and choking lungs. Sam's crew moved cautiously, boots crunching over charred branches, axes at the ready. Behind them, the fire roared like a beast, but in front, the haze shifted strangely. The silhouettes of the figures moved in perfect imitation of the crew's steps. They didn't run, they didn't panic, they just followed. The caves were revealed when a slab of scorched rock collapsed under the heat, revealing a gaping mouth in the mountain. Jagged black stone framed the entrance, and a thin wisp of cool air exhaled from the darkness like a warning. Sam stepped closer, trying to gauge the depth. The figures mirrored him from the smoke, his own body, crouched and waiting, stepping in unison. "Move," he said, low and urgent, signaling the crew toward the cave. "We don't have a choice. Fire's closing in." The first few steps inside the cave brought a relief from the heat, but an immediate sense of wrongness. The air smelled damp and earthy, yet there was an undertone of ash and something older, mineral and faintly sweet, like the smoke carried in the ridge but concentrated. Inside, the walls seemed alive. Shadows bent in the torchlight, twisting unnaturally. The figures outside continued their advance, following the crew with mechanical patience, unblinking eyes reflecting in the flickering flames beyond. Sam's pulse raced. Every sound echoed his own steps, the dragging of boots over stones, the faint scrape of axes. And somewhere in the back of the cave, there was a rhythm that wasn't theirs. A slow, deliberate dragging step that seemed to respond to their movement. Carla whispered, They know us. They know how we move. Every motion." "Yes," Sam said, voice tight. "And they're learning faster than we are." A low groan echoed through the chamber, wet and hollow. Something moved in the darkness, fluid, skeletal, slipping along the walls and floor. The shape was human enough to recognize, but wrong in ways the mind can't fully accept. Too long, too thin, joints bending at unnatural angles. It froze for a moment, then continued its pursuit, following the mimicry of the figures outside. Miguel stumbled on a loose stone. Instantly, one of the smoke figures outside faltered in the same way. Its mirrored stumble was a cruel mockery, deliberate and precise, as if whatever watched was testing them, learning their weaknesses. The cave narrowed into a twisting corridor, forcing the crew to move single file. Sam's thoughts raced. These shapes weren't just copying, they were anticipating. Every hesitation, every misstep was recorded, ready to be replicated in a more lethal form. From deeper in the cave, a soft hiss reached them. It wasn't the fire. It wasn't the wind. It was the sound of something exhaling in mimicry of their own breaths, rhythm and cadence perfectly timed. Sam swallowed hard. He realized the true terror of the smoke figures. They weren't just reflections. They were extensions of the land itself, elemental, patient, and hungry for recognition. They wanted to be seen as themselves. And when they were, the line between observer and observed blurred. By the time the crew reached a small chamber where the cave widened, the smoke outside had settled into a roiling grey ocean. Figures still walked toward the cave mouth, unhurried, endless in patience, unblinking and unrelenting. Sam's chest tightened. "This isn't just a fire," he whispered to himself. "It's a summons, and it wants us." Chapter 5. The cave's throat. The mouth of the cave yawned black and wet, exhaling a cool draft that smelled of damp limestone, burned roots, and something else, coppery, almost sweet, like blood boiled in water. Carson swept his flashlight across the entrance, his hand trembling against the rock. The beam landed on smears of soot, claw marks, as though something had dragged itself through recently. Behind him, Reese muttered, "Christ, this is where they came from." The smoke had pushed them here, deeper into the ridge, as if funneling them to this place. No matter how they shifted position, the flames circled closer, the ash falling like snowfall. It was as if the fire itself wanted them inside. "Only way out is through," Carson said hoarsely. His throat burned from hours of smoke. They entered. The first thing was the sound. The cave's throat swallowed their footsteps, bending them back at odd angles. Every crunch of gravel seemed to echo twice, once as their own, once as something following. Reese hissed, "Do you hear that?" But Carson didn't answer. His beam had landed on something lying half buried in the ash at the floor of the cavern. A helmet, yellow, scorched at the rim. The chin strap still snapped. Carson's chest tightened. He knew this helmet, the paint chipped near the brim, the initials JG carved faintly into the edge. Garcia's helmet. But Garcia had walked with them just 2 hours ago, hacking a fire line into the ridge before the smoke swallowed him. Then a shape moved deeper in the tunnel. Reese froze, every muscle taut. Carson! The beam caught it fully. A man, naked, skin slick with soot and condensation, his body strangely stretched, arms too long, fingers bending unnaturally. His face was Garcia's. Every contour, every familiar scar. But his eyes reflected the flashlight in flat, glassy panes. He blinked once, no, not blinked, twitched like a shutter catching. Then his mouth stretched in a smile, teeth faint and translucent, like porcelain. Garcia, Reese's voice cracked. The thing stepped forward, not stumbling, deliberate, one slow, crunching step at a time, as if savoring the weight of each footfall. It raised its hand, palm outward, as though mimicking the gesture of firefighters signaling each other through smoke. But its hand never stopped rising, past its head. Higher until the arm curved unnaturally, tendons straining, bones seeming to creak. Carson stumbled back. His boot struck stone, Maury footsteps. From the side passages, the walls themselves seemed to exhale shapes. Figures peeled out of the shadows, naked, grey, their faces drawn into uncanny familiarity. Carson saw himself among them. Not one double, but 3, 4, 5, all walking forward, their expressions empty, their smoke-scorched skin steaming faintly in the cave's damp air. One of them tilted its head in perfect mirror to him, then all the others followed, like a ripple. Out. Out now, Carson snapped, his voice breaking. But the passage behind them was already filling with smoke. Not drifting in, crawling, dragging itself along the rock like a living body, reaching for them. Reese raised his Pulaski, voice shaking. If they're us, if they're wearing our faces, the first double lunged. No scream, no warning. Its body slammed into Reese with the sound of wet wood snapping. They tumbled against the wall, the flashlight scattering beams wildly. For the briefest instant, Carson saw Reese's face and Reese's other face locking together in a grotesque embrace, jaws unhinging in unison. The cave boomed with the echo of Reese's scream, and then silence, except for the steady shuffle of bare feet moving closer. Chapter 6. The cave widened into a natural amphitheater, its walls shimmering with veins of black stone slick with condensed smoke. The air was thick, almost soup, every breath scraping down raw throats. Flashlights caught only fragments, a wall here, a sloping rise there. The rest was shifting shadow. "Hold here," Tors whispered, raising a hand. His voice cracked, part command, part plea. "We regroup, nobody wander, nobody," he didn't finish. From the fog at their backs came footsteps. Bare, wet-sounding slaps on stone, not rushed, not cautious, just inevitable. Hale swung his light toward the noise. It cut across the haze, caught the shape of someone stepping forward, someone with his same square jaw, same hunched shoulders, even the same smoke-streaked helmet. Only this version had no helmet straps, no blinking eyes, just that faint shine of wet skin and blackened lips. Hale froze, mouth slack. That's me. And then the others saw them. Mendez first. Her double walked from the opposite side, hair matted with ash, moving as if pulled by unseen strings. Then another, shaped like Belle, dragging a ruined leg but still coming, eyes fixed and unblinking. And then Tor's own shape, slipping from the deeper dark, face too smooth, its jaw opening in a silent scream that produced no sound. The crew clustered, backs nearly touching, each light snapping wildly to another angle, another double. "Jesus Christ," Mendez hissed, raising her Pulaski axe like a talisman. "They're us." "They're not us," Tors barked, but the panic in his voice betrayed him. "They're burned. They're smoke-birthed things. Don't let them touch you." But the things didn't lunge. They didn't rush. They simply advanced, inexorable, unhurried, one bare step at a time, like a line of condemned walking into fire. Bell cracked first. With a shout, half sob, half fury, he swung his shovel into the figure wearing his face. The steel rang out against bone and shoulder, but the double didn't stagger, didn't flinch. It simply leaned forward, pressing into the strike, closing the distance. Hale opened fire with his flare pistol. The flash turned the cavern blood-red, shadows writhing on every surface. For a moment the double in his likeness burned, its skin blistering into black petals. But it did not scream. It did not fall. It simply kept walking, its features melting but still recognizably him. Panic fractured the group. Mendez screamed curses as she hacked at a twin. Hale stumbled backward, firing blind, the echoes deafening. Bell threw himself bodily at his double, both toppling to the stone floor in a twisting, horrible parody of wrestling. And in the chaos, Chadeauxs saw something the others missed. Behind the crowd of doubles, deeper in the chamber, the smoke thickened into a single roiling column. Shapes flickered within it, not just their own faces, but others. Old faces, half-burned, some wearing old fire crew gear from decades past, some in ranch clothes, some with eyes long since melted away. The land wasn't just remembering them, it was remembering everyone who ever burned here. The doubles pushed closer, shoulder to shoulder now, pressing the crew inward like prey cornered by their own reflections. Chadeauxs' chest clenched, a terrible realization crashing in. They don't want to kill us, they want to take our places. Chapter 7. The air grew thicker, weighted with smoke that pressed into lungs like damp cloth. Their voices had grown hoarse from shouting through masks, names carried into the canyon walls and swallowed up by flame crack and shifting wind. By now, each of them had seen their own face once, sometimes only half glimpsed between curtains of smoke, other times so stark it was like staring into a mirror held at arm's length. At first, they tried to rationalize it. Stress, smoke inhalation, tricks of light on sweat-glazed visors. But the excuses had been stripped away piece by piece. The doubles never spoke. They never blinked. And when they walked directly for whoever was watching, heedless of rocks, fire, or ravines. They'd learned not to stare too long. But tonight, in the bowl of the canyon, the fire had driven them against the cave mouth again, forcing them into a place the land itself seemed to be offering. Black limestone gaped behind them, slick with condensation, its breath colder than the blaze outside. It was either take shelter inside, or be driven down by falling timber and flame. Ramirez had been the first to notice the shapes in the smoke again, 4 of them, fanning across the canyon mouth, their pale skins smeared with soot, but unmistakable in form. Naked, ash-dusted feet crunching over embered rock. One of them was Johnson, or rather, it wore his exact frame, his squared jaw. Even the small notch missing from his left ear from a chainsaw accident 2 summers back. "Stay close," Johnson barked, trying to steady his voice. He had his Pulaski raised, the firelight reflecting in sweat streaks down his temple. The 4 figures advanced, no hesitation, and then something subtle shifted. One of them stopped, not Johnson's twin, but Ramirez's. It turned, slowly, unnervingly deliberate, and looked directly into the smoke, past the others, locking on Ramirez as if it knew. Ramirez backed up until his pack hit the limestone wall. "It's me," he muttered. "It's me." "Don't look at it," Callow hissed, grabbing his sleeve, but it was too late. The figure that wore Ramirez's face stepped into the smoke, and when it vanished, they thought it was gone. Relief flared in Callow's chest, until a scream ripped out from 2 feet away. Ramirez staggered, clutching at his own throat as if strangled by invisible hands. His knees buckled. He gasped, a wet, guttural sound, and then fell forward onto the ground, twitching. The smoke rolled, thick and hot, and when it thinned just enough, Ramirez stood again. Only it wasn't him. The way he rose was wrong, too smooth, like a marionette tugged upright by unseen strings. His eyes never blinked. His jaw never flexed to breathe. He just looked at them, the whole crew at once, with that identical, unreadable face. And then, in a perfect imitation of Ramirez's voice, he spoke one word: "Run!" But the voice was flat, stripped of cadence, a sound rehearsed but not lived. They realized then the thing had succeeded. One of them had been taken, and none of them had been able to stop it. The others turned to flee, but the fire had already curved back down the ridge, funneling them inward, toward the black mouth of the cave. And Ramirez, or what wore him, stepped forward into the orange glow, smiling a smile he had never worn in life. Chapter 8. The Breathing Walls. The smoke thinned as they descended into the cave, but the darkness was worse than the fire above. Their helmet lamps stuttered against walls damp with mineral sweat, the rock surfaces glittering like wet glass. The air was close, heavy, every breath rasped. Their boots scraped against limestone that groaned in echo, as though the mountain itself shifted with their weight. Marisol led, her axe clutched so tightly her knuckles gleamed white. Behind her, Holt limped, muttering something under his breath that no one could quite catch. He kept glancing over his shoulder, like he expected someone to be there. The deeper they went, the louder it became, not the fire, but something else. A low hush, like wind funneling through stone, yet it wasn't wind. It pulsed. It inhaled when they did. It exhaled when they didn't. A rhythm threading itself into their lungs, like the cave was learning how they breathed. They stopped when Holt hissed and raised a shaking hand. Ahead, the passage widened into a rough cavern. Their lights cut across its floor and froze. Shapes. A dozen figures, standing at uneven distances, half melted by shadow. Naked, skin slick and grey in the beam, hair matted with soot. Their faces, God, their faces. Each one carried a resemblance to someone on the crew. Marisol saw her own mouth opening in silence, saw Holt's slack jaw, saw Marquez's eyes unblinking. And there were more, faces of men they'd lost hours ago, swallowed by smoke on the ridges. They stood still at first. Then with one synchronized step, they moved forward. "Back," Marisol whispered, her throat torn with dust. "Back now." But the way behind them was no safer, because as they turned, their beams caught more figures sliding soundlessly from the tunnels, peeling out of the rock itself like shadows turning solid. There was no sound, no footfall, just the scrape of their own boots and the hammer of their own hearts. Marquez raised his Pulaski and shouted, a useless, wordless thing meant to break the silence. For a moment, the echo of his voice filled the cave. Then it was followed by another echo, not his. The sound repeated from behind them, the same pitch, the same ragged edge, but a half-second late. It carried not from walls, but from throats. Throats of things wearing his face. The crew huddled close, lamps spinning, every direction closing in. The cave was no longer wide enough. No air was enough. And then Marisol realized something worse than the doubling. The figures didn't blink because they didn't need to. And as they drew closer, she saw the flicker of flame still caught inside their pupils, like a wildfire smoldering behind dead glass. The mountain had remembered them wrong, and it was multiplying. Chapter 9. The weight of its hands. The smoke followed them into the cavern like a living thing, curling through cracks, twisting into eddies that looked almost like limbs. Every time someone flicked on their headlamp, the beams only carved out slivers of clarity before the dark and haze swallowed them whole again. No one spoke anymore, except in clipped bursts. This way, move, stay close. Even those words felt borrowed, wrung out of dry throats that wanted to scream instead. Marisol was the first to hear it. She stopped so suddenly the line of them nearly collided. Footsteps. Her whisper wasn't questioning. It was flat. Final, the sound came a second later, not behind them, but around. Bare soles slapping damp rock out of rhythm with their own. Then another set, then another. They formed a huddle without agreeing to it, their headlamps crossing like knives. At first the light caught nothing but uneven walls. Then one by one, figures resolved out of the smoke. Not stumbling, not crawling, walking, always toward them, always at the same measured pace. Carlyle swore under his breath, no way out, no way out. Ethan gripped his helmet like a child clutching a toy, shaking it as though rattling could wake him from this. "They are us," he said. His lamp trembled, casting jerking shadows over the cave walls. "They're waiting for their turn." Then the sound of running. It was Darren, breaking rank, bolting past them deeper into the cave's black throat. His light swung wildly, briefly illuminating something ahead. A face. His own face, expressionless, staring right back. He screamed, not in pain at first, but in disbelief, a sound that cracked high like a breaking branch. The others surged forward to drag him back, but the smoke moved quicker. His double was already on him, rushing without changing expression, without a grunt or cry. They slammed together, not like a fight, but like a hand fitting a glove. Darren clawed, kicked, shouted for help, but the figure didn't strike him, it only pressed. Hands on his shoulders, forehead against his forehead, breathless silence against his screams. "Pull him," Marisol shrieked, grabbing Darren's arm. Carlyle and Ethan joined, hauling with all their strength. For one blinding moment, it seemed like they'd tear him free. Then Darren's voice fractured. It came in two tones at once, his and the flat, toneless mimicry of the double. His body stiffened, then sagged. His eyes rolled white. And in a movement that made the others recoil in horror, the double seemed to sink inside him. The smoke swallowed them both, leaving only Darren kneeling in the beam of their lights. He raised his head. His eyes stared straight through them, wide, glassy, unblinking, and he smiled. "Keep moving," he said, but the voice was wrong. Too calm, too certain, the voice of something that had been waiting in the dark all along. Chapter 10. The Fracture. The cave widened just enough to mock them with the illusion of safety. A hollow chamber, dripping with condensation, the sound of water plinking like tiny clocks into unseen pools. Their headlamps jittered across rough stone, picking out shapes in the dark that looked like people hunched against the walls. For one sick, tense second, no one breathed. Then they realized the people were only mineral outcroppings, eroded pillars that suggested human silhouettes but didn't move. Not yet. They clustered together in the middle of the chamber. 4 of them now, Garrett, Rays, Marla, and Darren. But Darren wasn't Darren anymore. He crouched on his haunches, his breaths rasping through his teeth in uneven bursts, like he couldn't quite remember how lungs worked. His pupils had dilated into fat, shining voids that reflected their beams with too much brightness. His soot-streaked skin looked almost waxy, as though the fire outside had softened him at the edges. Rays wouldn't look at him. He kept his eyes on the wet floor, pacing small circles like a dog about to bolt. Marla gripped her axe in both hands, trembling so hard the head rattled against the rock every time she shifted her weight. Garrett was the only one who knelt in front of Darren, flashlight trembling as he tried to keep his voice steady. "Talk to me, brother. Just say something. Anything." Darren only tilted his head bird-like, as though the words had hit him but couldn't find purchase. He opened his mouth wide, jaw straining, tongue twitching behind his teeth. But what came out wasn't sound. It was breath. Not the way humans breathe, but a long, hollow exhalation that bent strangely in the acoustics of the cavern. A hiss that seemed to echo before it reached their ears. Marla swore and stumbled back. "That's not him." "It's him," Garrett snapped, eyes wild. He just needs time," Rays muttered. "Time for what?" "To finish changing." He gestured toward Darren without looking up. "You saw what happened in the smoke. You saw him get taken. That thing isn't him anymore." The argument ricocheted around the chamber, brittle with fear. Marla's voice shook, but it carried a blade's edge. "We can't keep dragging him with us. It's slowing us down. It's calling them closer. You know it." Garrett turned on her, lips curled back. "If it were you, would you want us to just leave you?" Marla's grip on the axe tightened. "If it were me, I'd want you to put me down before I became one of those." The air went taut. Even the cave seemed to lean in, listening. Darren shifted suddenly, lurching forward on his hands like an animal. Garrett startled back, but didn't raise his tool. He couldn't. Darren's body trembled, muscles twitching in spasms, and for an instant it looked like he might collapse altogether. Then he smiled, not with his mouth, with his whole face. His lips peeled back too far, teeth bared in a grimace that carried no warmth, no recognition. It was a perfect caricature of happiness, the kind of smile you'd carve into a mask if you'd never seen a human wear one. Marla raised her axe. Garrett blocked her with his arm. "No!" And that was it. That was the splintering point. Their unity, already fraying, ripped down the middle. Rays stood apart, shaking his head, muttering under his breath like a prayer. Garrett knelt in front of the thing that wore Darren's skin, swearing he could save him. Marla lifted her weapon, sweat dripping into her eyes, breathing hard through clenched teeth. Somewhere in the dark of the chamber, the sound of footsteps began, slow, deliberate, approaching through the tunnels. Maury doubles, drawn by that inhuman exhale. The fire crew was no longer a crew. They were 3 terrified strangers arguing over whether to kill the 4th before the cave itself decided for them. And Darren just kept smiling. Chapter 11. The one still breathing. The cave air had grown thicker, as though the smoke itself had seeped into the stone, staining the walls, clinging to their lungs. Every breath scraped raw. The only sound was the coughing, boots scuffing on uneven rock, and the distant drip of water somewhere deeper inside. No one spoke of Darren anymore. They hadn't seen him since the thing that looked like him dragged him into the smoke and came back in his place. That was the moment they had all stopped trusting each other. "Don't look at me like that," Nadia hissed at Reed, her soot-darkened eyes darting. "I'm not one of them." "You could be," Reed shot back. His voice cracked. He hadn't slept in 2 days, maybe 3. His pupils were blown wide from fear and smoke inhalation, black coins glinting in the glow of his headlamp. "Stop," Marquez rasped. He leaned against the wall, one arm pressed to his ribs where a fall had bruised him purple. "Fighting's not going to help. We stick together or we're dead." But the words rang hollow, because already 2 of them weren't sure who else was still them. Something shuffled at the tunnel's mouth. A shape, tall, dragging its bare feet. Reed swung his light toward it, and there he was, Darren. His shirt gone, chest smeared with ash, his face cut with the reflection of firelight that wasn't there. He stood motionless, head cocked. When the beam caught his eyes, Reed's stomach lurched. Too wide, too dry, no blink. "Jesus Christ," Nadia whispered. Darren wasn't alone. Behind him, more figures slipped into view, barely outlined in the haze, as if the cave itself had grown bodies. 5, 6, a dozen, each with that slack-jawed focus, each wearing the faces of the crew. Reed's breath hitched. He counted 2 versions of himself. One stood behind Darren, tilting its head in eerie synchronization with the real him. Marquez's hand dropped to his belt, finding the axe strapped there. His knuckles gleamed white. Back up now." The doubles moved forward as one, silent and slow, their pale feet leaving no echo against the stone. The real Darren, or what had once been, opened its mouth. A sound leaked out. Not words, not breath, but the rasp of flame climbing dry pine. A crackle like kindling catching. Nadia screamed and pressed her palms over her ears. The noise set Reed trembling. It sounded like the wildfire itself had crawled into the cave to speak with human lungs. The others began to echo it, 12 throats clicking and splitting into sparks, a choir of burning wood. Marquez shouted, swinging his axe. The blade bit into stone, sparks jumping, but the doubles didn't flinch. They advanced until the real crew was forced against the narrowing tunnel wall. "Goddamn it, run," Marquez bellowed. Reed didn't move. His doppelganger had stopped 3 feet from him, wearing his exact soot-smudged face, his exact torn uniform, except the mouth didn't line up right. It hung open wider than it should, chin trembling as though unhinged. Nadia grabbed Reed's arm, dragging him. "That's not you," she spat, but Reed wasn't sure anymore. Watching it, he felt something pulling at him like a mirror that wanted to suck him in. Marquez shoved them both deeper into the cave. The doubles followed without hesitation, their smoke-crackling chorus swelling louder until it drowned the sound of boots on rock. Every step further inside, the crew knew. They weren't escaping anymore. They were being herded. And for the first time, all 3 of them wondered the same thought, though none dared speak it. How many of us are even left? Chapter 12. The mouths that breathe smoke. The survivors push deeper into the labyrinth, not because they know where they're going, but because there is nowhere else left. Their headlamps flicker against rock walls damp with condensation. Though the fire still rages above, they are now in an environment that feels too alive, as though the cave itself is exhaling with them. The doubles have multiplied. Where before there were 1-for-1 apparitions, now there are variations, like mistakes made in copying. Too tall, too thin, too smooth-skinned, faces blurred into featureless planes until the light hits them, and the mistakes rearrange into familiar eyes. The crew begins to whisper that the cave is no longer showing them doubles, it is breeding them. Every sound becomes suspect. A drip of water might be a footstep. A cough echoes back twice, slightly delayed, like another throat is mimicking. The crew stops talking because when one of them whispers, another voice whispers back in perfect sync, but from the dark behind them. Darren's double, or what they still think might be Darren, lingers at the edge of their lamps. He doesn't blink, doesn't speak, but always breathes louder than anyone else. Some swear his mouth doesn't close. The paranoia tears at the group's cohesion. They start marking each other, charcoal smears across their cheeks, slashes of ash. desperate to track who is real. But when they shine their lights forward, they see doubles with the same markings, smudged across uncanny faces. Then comes the first true wrongness of sound. They hear their captain calling from the direction they came. His voice, panicked, begging, reverberates down the tunnel. But they know he burned alive outside the cave. One of the crew bolts toward it, insisting they have to save him. The others hold her back, and in her screams the doubles gather closer, faces glowing pale and moist in the flickering light. The chapter crescendos on their realization. The doubles don't need to replace them one at a time anymore. They're coming in groups, in crowds, like smoke filling a room. The last scene leaves them pressed into a single cavern, backs against the stone, while a sea of naked, familiar bodies begins walking toward them in silence, filling every path of retreat. Chapter 13. The ones the fire remembers. The cave widened into a cathedral of stone. Their headlamps swung across black walls that gleamed with wetness, streaked with soot, as if even here the wildfire had licked its way inside. The smoke hung low, veiling everything. It pressed against their eyes and lungs until each breath sounded like it was drawn through wet cloth. Marisol stumbled forward, dragging the last flare from her pack, striking it with shaking hands. The red glow painted the chamber in viscera, and they were already waiting. Not 3, not 10, dozens. The doubles filled the chamber like a silent congregation. Naked, soot-streaked, their eyes blackened pits that reflected no light. Each bore the fire crew's faces, Darren, Kyle, Marisol, Hank, over and over, repeating like a memory someone had tried to redraw too many times. None of them blinked. None spoke. They simply turned in unison, like a tide of mannequins stirred awake by the flare's hiss. Kyle whispered, voice breaking, "Jesus Christ, they're all us." One stepped forward. His face was Hank's, but too smooth, too exact, no scars, no wrinkles carved by sun and years, just the outline of him like a photograph walking. Hank raised his axe, though his arms trembled. "Stay back." It kept walking, over jagged rock, through smoke, across black pools of water that should have stopped it. Its feet didn't falter. It came closer, closer, until Hank swung. The axe went through flesh like wet clay. The double crumpled. And then, slowly, impossibly, it began to knit back together, bones cracking as it pulled itself upright again. Maury stepped forward, a Marisol without her burn scars, a Kyle without the crooked nose he'd broken as a kid, a Darren who was smiling wide, wrong, teeth too white. The crew backed into one another, ringed in. The chamber filled with the sound. A terrible sound, not voices, not breathing, the hiss of fire. The doubles inhaled in perfect unison, lungs rasping like flames sucking air. Then, as if answering, Marisol's flare sputtered out. The red light bled into darkness. The last thing Kyle saw in the fading glow was his own face, standing only a foot away, eyes wide, mouth opening, not to speak, but to release a long, drawn-out breath of smoke. And all around them, the chamber exhaled. The fire had remembered their faces, and now it wanted them back. You made it back for now, but the things in the dark never truly leave, do they? They watch, they wait, and perhaps they remember you now too. If you want to hear more, if you dare to listen again, step back into the shadows. Like the video, subscribe, but know this, some doors once opened do not close so easily.